Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Our top story: Google, Microsoft, Nvidia, U.S. tech giants boosting China's AI development, a technology sought after by the Chinese military. More on what that means for U.S. national security. The Chinese Communist Party is accused of meddling in U.S. elections. A Chinese national was arrested and charged in California. Beijing has been calling Taiwan its territory, but in a rare statement, Secretary of State Antony Blinken says it's a matter that concerns the world.
Fundamentally, this is everyone's business, because were there to be a crisis over Taiwan, the entire world would be affected by it.
U.S. tech giants are boosting China's development of artificial intelligence, a technology critical to the Chinese military. From developing Chinese talent and companies in the field to investing in AI research at military-linked universities, we unpack it all. NTD's Juliet Song has the details.
Artificial intelligence is critical to the future battlefield. If semiconductors have replaced oil as the critical resource of today, AI will be the equivalent of semiconductors in the future. And AI is the area Beijing has made a national priority to surpass the U.S. in. Some major U.S. companies seem to be unwittingly aiding the Chinese Communist Party to reach that goal. Both Microsoft and Google run programs in China that boost AI startups. Microsoft's project, called Microsoft for Startups, aims to help Chinese AI startups grow by providing mentorship and financial support. The program focuses on companies that specialize in AI, blockchain, and cloud. Over 800 Chinese tech companies are on the list. Google runs a similar program, helping Chinese companies expand business overseas. Chinese firms that specialize in AI applications can apply. Same with Nvidia, a U.S. company that leads in microchips for AI applications. Its AI chips are sought after by the Chinese military. Nvidia runs a program that provides AI-related technology training for startups across the globe. It covers many industries, though Chinese AI startups can also apply. Over 2,000 Chinese companies have joined the program. Rex Lee is a cybersecurity advisor at MySmart Privacy. He said these programs run the risks of indirectly supporting the Chinese military.
This is associated with hybrid warfare. Hybrid warfare targets individuals, children, teens, business users, military, members of the military, law enforcement, government officials, elected officials.
Lee said even though these training programs have no ill intention, they could be educating the wrong people due to a lack of oversight. In a statement to NTD, Nvidia said, quote, "Startups that work for foreign militaries are not eligible for its inception membership." In China, the regime compels private companies to help develop the country's military technology. The strategy is called military and civil fusion. Under Chinese law, companies have to hand over data to authorities if they ask for it. Over on Capitol Hill, alarms were raised years ago. In 2019, then chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff testified that the Chinese military was benefiting from Google's work in China.
You're telling me that Google, an American company, supposedly, is refusing to work with the Department of Defense, but is doing work with China in a way that at least indirectly benefits the Chinese government. Is that correct?
I haven't heard the word refuse, but there's a lack of willingness to support DoD programs.
In 2018, Google said it was no longer interested in a $10 billion cloud computing contract with the Pentagon. The next year, Google said it would not renew a contract to help the U.S. military analyze aerial drone imagery.
We watch with great concern when industry partners work in China, knowing that there is that indirect benefit. And frankly, indirect may be not a full characterization of the way it really is. It's more of a direct benefit to the Chinese military.
In 2017, Google opened an AI research facility in Beijing. A year later, Google announced that it would invest in AI research at China's Tsinghua University. That university is funded by the Chinese military, works on defense research, and trains talent for China's nuclear weapons program. In 2019, a Google researcher contributed to a project that could improve Beijing's J-20 fighter jet, one designed to rival America's F-2022 Raptor. Now we look at Microsoft. It also has an AI lab in Beijing. It developed AI talent for China, and some of the researchers later took up key positions at Chinese tech giants such as Alibaba, Baidu, and Tencent. Others started their own companies like SenseTime, China's largest facial recognition startup sanctioned by the US. Academics at Microsoft's Beijing lab worked with the Chinese military university on AI research. They co-published 3 research papers in 2018. That Chinese university is controlled by China's top military body. Rex Lee says another risk is AI integrated apps developed in China, available to download in Google and iOS app stores.
You can't tell the U.S. public that we're in competition with China regarding AI when 3 of the largest U.S. corporations, maybe 3 of the largest corporations in the world based in the United States, are actually responsible for the global distribution of AI integrated apps and platforms developed in China.
He said apps developed with the Chinese version of AI pose privacy and security threats to the end users, as these apps could conduct video and audio surveillance and breach other networks the phone is connected to. NTD has reached out to Google and Microsoft for comment, but did not hear back before airtime. Juliet Song, NTD News.
The Chinese Communist Party is accused of meddling in U.S. elections. A Chinese national was arrested on Thursday on charges of acting as an illegal agent for Beijing. Yao Ning's son was charged with attempting to influence U.S. elections. The DOJ said Yao Ning's son was the campaign manager for a politician who was elected in 2022 to the city council of a California city. The DOJ statement didn't name the politician. Court documents show plans to promote a city council member aligned with Beijing. Son's alleged activities raise concerns over the Chinese Communist Party's interference in U.S. politics. Son is also charged with conspiring with another Chinese man, Chen Hun. Last month, Chen was sentenced to prison for similar charges. And in July, Chen pleaded guilty to using Chinese money to bribe federal agents to undermine the spiritual group Falun Gong, which is heavily persecuted in China. The charges against Sun followed those against a former aide to 2 New York governors in September, also by the last name Sun, charged with acting as an illegal agent of the CCP. The U.S. deported more illegal immigrants in fiscal year 2024 than in almost a decade. Immigration and Customs Enforcement removed more than 270,000 individuals, a record high since 2015. Most of them have been sent back to South America, with Mexico leading the list. So far, the U.S. government has used 4 charter flights this year to send more than 400 Chinese illegal immigrants back to China. In the last 4 years, an estimated 11 million illegal immigrants have entered the U.S. during President Biden's term. Now we turn to the Indo-Pacific. Taiwan is everyone's business. This is the message Secretary of State Antony Blinken delivered earlier this week at the Council on Foreign Relations.
What does China say every time the word Taiwan comes up? Don't even mention it. It's no one's business but our own. What we've been able to do is, I think, open the eyes of almost the entire world to the fact that, no, fundamentally, this is everyone's business. Because were there to be a crisis over Taiwan, the entire world would be affected by it. You've got 50% of commercial container traffic going through the strait every day. You've got 70% of the microelectronics of the chips being fabricated in Taiwan. If that's taken off the grid, you've got an economic crisis that goes right around the world. The demand signal coming from countries for China to act responsibly is more across the board and clearer and louder than, again, at any time that I remember.
Blinken said he knows he's been successful since every time he speaks with the Chinese foreign minister, he has to sit through half an hour or more of complaints about how the U.S. has aligned these countries. Blinken questioned whether China truly wants peace in Ukraine, given that China supplies Russia with weapons. He said countries around the world, particularly in Europe, oppose China on this issue and are taking action against Chinese companies involved in aiding Russia. In a race against Chinese influence in the Indo-Pacific, Australia has made a $74 million deal to enhance police training on the Solomon Islands. This is a Pacific country that is considered part of Australia's backyard.
And my government is proud to make a significant investment in the police force of the Solomon Islands to ensure that they can continue to take primary responsibility for security in the Solomons. It's also the case that today we reinforce Prime Minister Manele's comment that Australia is the security partner of choice.
The deal will pay for more police in the Solomon Islands and create a police training center in the island nation's capital. Australia is competing with China for influence in the South Pacific, and a security deal between the Solomon Islands and China that is already in place. The agreement has raised concerns among U.S. allies about the potential for China to build a naval base on the strategically important islands. When asked if the new deal would require the removal of the Chinese security presence in the Solomons, Prime Minister Albanese did not directly answer.
Coming up, the UK on alert. Spy allegations are raising concerns over Chinese interference in nearly every aspect of British life.
There is a very active plan to infiltrate organizations and government departments, ministerial departments, and to reach every echelon of research, of science, technology, defense, and so on.
China's transnational repression on U.S. soil, even in Washington, D.C. Grant Newsham, senior fellow at the Center for Security Policy, breaks it all down for us. Welcome back to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Recent spy allegations bring renewed concern over Chinese interference in British political and economic life, as this influence could be used to massage foreign policy and suppress criticism. A China watchdog warns this could lead to more direct affronts to the stability of the UK. NTD's international correspondent Malcolm Hudson has more for us from London.
Two recent cases of alleged spies tied to China's United Front Work Department have renewed concerns in Britain about the dangers of Chinese interference. Now, the United Front is an arm of the Chinese regime, tasked with influence operations with an estimated 40,000 members worldwide. Earlier, when I was speaking to Mark Sabah, the director of the Committee for Freedom in Hong Kong Foundation, he said we don't see this type of behavior from nations like Spain or Luxembourg, but we do see it from China.
There is a very active plan to infiltrate organizations and government departments, ministerial departments, and to reach every echelon of research, of science, technology, defense, and so on. We don't have this problem with the French or the Spanish or the Swiss or the Swedes, but it keeps coming up time and time again with the CCP.
According to a 2023 report by Britain's Intelligence and Security Committee, China has penetrated every sector of the UK economy. Britain's new government is seeking to reset ties with China after past years of a harder stance. British Prime Minister Starmer met with Chinese leader Xi last month, and Finance Minister Rachel Reeves is expected to travel to China in the new year to deepen trade relations. These closer ties come with serious risks. Sabah said that by keeping a hand in every aspect of Western democracies, the CCP can choose to rein those ties in, to covertly influence or even directly destabilize.
They could essentially at some point pull the plug on a project or pull the plug on a factory.
For example,
if China wanted to, they could tell their population no more students are going to the United Kingdom, which means that dozens of universities around the country would collapse overnight.
This could be done to other sectors too, from government to banking to energy. Recent spy allegations show Chinese influence has reached the highest level of British society. Businessman Teng Bo-yang was very close to British Prince Andrew, with court documents saying he was trusted to act on the prince's behalf in China, while lawyer Christine Lee had cultivated deep relations with British politicians, lobbying to increase trade links. So, what measures can protect against the risks? The British government is set to introduce a foreign influence registration scheme. There's pressure to categorize China under the enhanced tier, acknowledging it as a national security threat, alongside other nations like Russia, Iran and North Korea. Sabah said the government could also list certain Chinese companies as dangerous.
The government could list them as limiting the amount that they're allowed to invest or purchase from the United Kingdom. And so you put those sorts of restrictions on them, which means that even if there is some attempt at damage, it won't bring that industry or that sector down.
Sabah said that if the intelligence community has warned China has infiltrated every aspect of the UK economy, then these warnings must be taken seriously. Malcolm Hudson, NTD News, London.
For decades, the Chinese Communist Party has employed a string of tactics aimed at pressuring dissidents outside its jurisdiction. This practice, known as transnational repression, is happening across the United States, including in Washington, D.C. NTD's Steve Lance discussed the CCP's malign influence with Grant Newsham, senior fellow at the Center for Security Policy and author of When China Attacks.
Before we dive into today's discussion on China, I want to play a quick and recent soundbite from U.S. Ambassador to China, Nicholas Burns. Let's play that sound.
We reiterate our deep concern about the PRC's restrictions on fundamental freedoms and its use of transnational repression.
Grant, if you could, right off the top, explain to us, what is this term transnational repression? How significant is it that a sitting U.S. ambassador to China is mentioning it?
This is pretty serious. When the ambassador actually goes public and says China is doing this or doing something overseas. And transnational repression is ultimately the Chinese Communist Party reaching overseas, using its agents, its front people, to intimidate, to threaten, and even inflict violence, and sometimes more, on people who criticize the Chinese Communist Party.
And with that said, Grant, we've seen instances, as you mentioned, of dissidents, including U.S. citizens, being targeted by CCP actors right here on U.S. soil. Considering this, what is the scope of Beijing's transnational repression efforts, and why should the American people really be concerned about this?
Well, the scope of it is global. There really is no country on earth where the Chinese Communist Party won't try to reach out now and silence people who criticize it. Why should we be concerned? Well, this is America. We have our rules and we have freedom of speech. We don't let this sort of thuggery go on. And for us to just sit back and tolerate it is outrageous for any administration to do this. When Chinese people come to the United States and become permanent residents, citizens, or even if they're just studying here, well, they have all the freedoms that Americans have, and one of those is to speak out on what you think. It is freedom of expression, and is absolutely fundamental to what America is. And you see this particularly, in just one example, at universities, where obviously many Chinese students study, that the Chinese student associations in a number of these places are known to have their watchers, their spies in there who monitor what people say, what other Chinese people say. And they will sometimes threaten them, pressure them themselves. There's cases where the Chinese consulates have been involved in this, working with their agents in these associations to apply pressure on Chinese students. And one of the obvious ways to threaten people is, well, you've got relatives back in China, don't you? We think you should be quiet. The Chinese police stations that have been set up in a number of cities in the United States and globally are staffed by agents of the Chinese Communist Party. And these are not service centers where people get their driver's license renewed. These are places where you monitor the Chinese diaspora, the local Chinese community, and you threaten them. Obviously, the use of Chinese organized crime is a tool which the Communist Party uses to suppress, to keep an eye on, and quiet down the people who would challenge the Chinese Communist Party. So if China wants to do it in China, well, that's their business. But if they want to do it in the United States, this is something that there should be no tolerance for. And not just deporting people who do this sort of thing on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party, but lock them up for a good long while is what we should do. This hasn't been done.
To your point, Grant, there was recently a leaked memo from the highest levels of China's Ministry of Security to specifically go after Falun Gong and any Falun Gong related entities like those of Shenyun Performing Arts founded by Falun Gong practitioners, and as well as the Epoch Times for that matter. Talk to us about the CCP's use of proxies, whether it be other media outlets. We've seen the New York Times release a string of very unusual hit pieces against the Shenyun Performing Arts, 6 in the span of a month or two, very unusual, as well as our own federal agencies to go after American people.
Well, the Chinese do like to use proxies, and they've been very successful at it. And the proxies are not just other Chinese people, but often it's local people, Americans, who will do their bidding for them. And they have been fairly successful, actually, in getting some of America's legacy media to really operate on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party and to go after these groups which you've just mentioned. And it's, as I said, they have been successful at it. And they will there's different ways to get into these organizations, but they seem to have no trouble finding sort of their lackeys who will do their bidding for them. But this is very much part of China's modus operandi, not just in the United States, but you'll see it in Europe, you'll see it in the UK, in Taiwan, Australia, as efforts to suborn the media and to sometimes it's unwittingly, but usually these people know exactly what they're doing, and to suppress and try to quiet and, if ideally for them, is to destroy these organizations. And one example, and the effects of this are often not, they can be ripple effects. And one thing I would cite, for example, is the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Milley. From somewhere he got the idea that, well, the Epoch Times isn't a real newspaper. Well, Milley was a failure in just about everything else he did, so I wasn't surprised to hear him say this. But it shows how this word can get out. And the Chinese like to operate both directly, indirectly, and to allow locals to actually do their bidding for them.
Grant Newsham, as always, really appreciate your perspective. Thank you.
A pleasure. Thanks for having me.
That's all for today's China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. If you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at chinainfocus@ntd.com. We'd love to hear from you. For round-the-clock original news coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for watching. See you soon.
Hi everybody, I'm Kelly Wright, host of America's Hope right here on NTD. Guess what? We've got a special celebration because it's beginning to look a lot like Christmas. So coming up on NTD, we're going to be celebrating a joyful Christmas, and you're all invited to watch as we celebrate Christmas in music and song from around the world. Join us on NTD.